بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So love in the Arabic language is has many words and many different levels, right? The Arabs in the past, they used to have, like, for the things that are important in their culture, they'd have many words for it. So, for example, the word love, you'll find many different words describing what loves, different types of loves, right? Camel, dog, sheep, swords, wine, in Jahiliyyah. There's many, many different words describing it in detail. So, in love, obviously, was one of their important qualities that you find in the Arab poetry, and they have many different descriptions for it. And I'm not going to go into the detail of all those descriptions, but just in general. So there's different levels, like linguistically speaking. Sorry, there's different levels. So the first one is like kind of just like a desire or a fleeting, feeling, and that could be for something, like a nice car or a certain type of food or something like that. And then there's like relational love, like love for your parents, love for your child, love for your brothers and sisters. Even those type of loves differ, for your mom, with your dad, with your daughter, with your son, with your sister, with your brothers, different types of loves. That's like a natural love that we have from the fitrah. When you're raised with certain people, you kind of have that natural love. And then there's like the gained love, which one has for his spouse. And then there's like, they go into deep detail of the different types of love as well, halal or not halal, but like they go into, having love for the opposite gender, and then it can reach levels that they call like crazy love or crazy love, for example, that he actually or she actually can lose their mind in that type of love, and that's the love that's really not permissible. The highest and purest form of love is the love of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the love of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. He says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَشُدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ وَلَا يَرَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا إِذْ يَرَوْنَ الْعَذَابَ أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعَذَابِ. Among the people are those who set up like equals or competitors to Allah Azza wa Jal, loving them as they love Allah. But the faithful, the believers, they are more strong or more ardent in their love of Allah. And the wrongdoers will see, when they see the punishment, that power belongs to Allah, and Allah is severe in punishment. So here, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشُدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. The believers, they have a strong love for Allah. Their love for Allah overrides every other love. That's the description of the believers. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, from the sweetness of Iman is to love Allah Azza wa Jal and the Messenger more than you love anything else. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, وَهَلَ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الْحُبُّ وَالْبُغْضُ فِي اللَّهِ. And is the religion nothing more than loving and hating for the sake of Allah? So the whole deen, Aisha radiallahu anha is saying, is based upon love and hate for Allah. La ilaha illallah. Just negating anything that's worshipped other than Allah. Illallah, except Allah. Hate, love. تكفر بالطاغوت وتؤمن بالله. You negate the taghut and you have iman in Allah. You hate the taghut, you love Allah. So this is the deen is built upon al-hubbu fillah. Also, some scholars, they said, in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he sacrificed, or he was ordered to sacrifice his son, they say this goes back to al-hubbu fillah, because he was Khalil ar-Rahman. He was the close companion to Allah, the most merciful. Khalil means that you're at the highest level of closeness to your companion. There's no room, khalla, there's no more space left for something else. So it's said that when Allah Azza wa Jalla blessed him with a son, after so many years he never had a son, his son became very, very dear to him. And he started to grow very attached to the son. Whereas it started getting into that attachment, interfering with being the Khalil of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So in some tafsir, you will find the scholars talking or commenting upon this, saying the sacrifice wasn't mainly to sacrifice Ismail alayhi salam, but was to sacrifice having something more dear to him in his heart than Allah Azza wa Jal, or having an attachment to something more than he should be having an attachment for, So really he was sacrificing that attachment and making his heart firm for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's the importance of this al-hubbu fi ad-din, al-hubbu fi Allah, loving Allah Azza wa Jal and loving in the deen. So with this as a backdrop, I want to ask you guys a question. Do you think that love outside of marriage is for... We're talking about like a very specific topic, inshallah, right now, because it's a long topic, it's a wide topic. Like I said, the Imam, he wrote in this book that we're going through about 70 pages on this subject, different types of loves and the permissible forms and stuff like that. We'll touch a little bit on it, but he goes into much more detail. And also he has a book called Rawdat al-Muhabbin, the Garden of the Beloved, right? It's a whole book about love. And he talks about the subject in detail, mashallah, and it's beautiful. But we're just going to talk about this one subject in a brief manner, just because like I said, some people have been asking me, and I thought to get it out there, inshallah. So with that backdrop, we went, is it permissible to have love for the other person outside of marriage? Anybody want to answer? The person like of the opposite gender, obviously, or relations-wise, is it permissible to have love outside of marriage? Anybody? Is it permissible or not?
Or what type of love?
Like loving the person of the opposite sex, or the opposite gender, like a man loving a woman or a woman loving a man before they're married. Okay. So that, yeah, she's saying that in order to get love, you'd have to have some some steps to reach that level. So and some of those steps outside of marriage would not be permissible. So she's saying in that sense, it won't be permissible. Anybody else? So what about love at first sight?
Know your gaze.
Huh? Know your gaze? Alhamdulillah. But the Prophet ﷺ said the first gaze is for you, and the second gaze, khalas. But you have a chance at the first gaze. So a beautiful sister walk by, and you're like, subhanAllah. And then you lower your gaze, but her image stuck in your mind. Or for the women, a beautiful brother walked by, and they saw that one glance, and they lowered their gaze, but the image stuck in their mind. So the scholars, they say, in that case, if you are not transgressing the bounds of Islam and love enters your heart, that love is permissible. Also, for example, if a person was married to another woman and they got divorced, but he had a deep love for her, she had a deep love for him, and even after they got divorced, that love is still there, even though they're not married anymore. So the scholars, they say that those things that you're not capable to control, you're not forcing yourself to act upon it, that form of love is you're not going to get held accountable for, right? Also, for example, like in the marriage situation, the scholars say, like a sister heard of a very good brother that's on the deen, and he looks good and he's calling to Islam, and she wants to marry him, right? She loves him in that sense, that she wants him to be his husband, but she doesn't like go and try to contact him improperly or transgress the bounds and go dating and all that other stuff. But just the first initial stage, like I would like to marry such and such. So scholars say that sense is okay. However, if you transgress the bounds and you start having like illicit communications, going out improperly, that's when you get held accountable. That's the haram form, right? And it's always best to go through the proper channels. So like in this country it's more difficult. Overseas it's a lot easier because you have families and they can go and check out the sister or the brother and let you know more details. So here it's a little bit more difficult. So I would advise, if there's like an initial liking and some type of agreement, for example, that person could be the spouse, then go straight to the proper channels if you can, to the father of the woman, right? And ask, can I have permission to discuss marriage with your daughter? So this way it will be blessed. Because if you go through the improper channels, you leave room for the shaitan. And I find a lot of brothers and a lot of sisters are getting deep feelings for the other person, and the marriage that hasn't, it might not even happen, for example. And sometimes brothers will, unfortunately, it starts out with good niyyah, that you're doing it, you're trying to get married and you're trying to please Allah Azza wa Jal, but sometimes it gets to the point where the shaitan plays a trick on them, and it's just something that's like a relationship outside of marriage, and then the marriage concept was kind of forgotten, you know. So it's important if you want to go forward to try to use the appropriate means. Also, the reputation of people can be tarnished if the improper means are used, you know. Like if it gets out that certain people are dating or transgressing the bounds and talking too much and, you know, having improper relations, they're not married, and they might not know that you guys are discussing marriage, other people might know that you're discussing marriage, then the improper, you know, it can cause to tarnish one's reputation. So that's why the scholars, they're very keen on going through the proper channels. Like overseas, they're very strict in the sense, like they're like, you can't write to them, you can't talk to them, you can't do anything without going to the father first, you know. And I understand. In this country, it's a little bit more difficult. So I'm not giving like a fatwa, I'm not saying it's okay. I don't know, Allahu A'lam, but I can understand having like an initial, maybe like getting to know or knowing a little bit about the person sufficient enough to go to ask the father for her hand in marriage, right? But one has to be very careful from transgressing those bounds, and it's always better to do it the proper way first, you know. Some people, they'll be in a relationship for over a year and the father was not even asked, and that's not good. So the brother might, you know, like overseas, it's definitely, they know better. Like they'll say like, you know, the girl she's talking to this guy, so what if I get married to her and she starts talking to another guy for you know, it's easy for her to talk to guys and stuff like that. You know, here it's a little bit different, like I said. So, but just still, you should be careful in not transgressing the bounds and trying your best to. Your main intention is to please Allah Azza wa Jal, and if you follow the means that please Allah, you won't be let down. Like you shouldn't get attached to someone or anything, for example, above the attachment to Allah. And this is, we're going to just read like a small section of the book that he gets into deep, a little bit more detail about that, showing how it can actually contradict with Tawheed. Because it's called al-ishq, which is like a love that transgresses the proper bounds. It can lead to forms of shirk sometimes, and it gets the person, you know, so obsessed about what he's trying to love, and he forgets the main purpose is love of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? And he becomes so attached to that thing, that material thing, or that person, the girl or the man, and he forgets about Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might punish him through that, you know. You have like the stories in the past of Majnun Layla, the one who went crazy over the woman, or Romeo and Juliet, they kill themselves over each other, you know. This is not proper love. You know, proper love is built upon loving Allah Azza wa Jal first and foremost. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless that love that you have with your spouse, you know. So always try to be careful for letting the shaitan trick you. You know, even if you have good intentions, the shaitan can come to the door and change your intentions. So be clear and as clear as possible from the beginning, and always have the feelings of the other person you're talking to into account. You never want to hurt someone's feelings. You never want to play games with the person's feelings or a person's heart, you know. Especially like, you know, I know certain brothers, the excuse that they're using is that they're trying to find a wife, you know, and then the door is open. You know, they haven't made a commitment 100%. Yes, but sometimes the girl that you're talking to, you know, improperly or too long, she might develop feelings for you that she can't help. And then you go and just like close the door on her and she gets hurt, you know. And the sister can do it to the brothers as well, same thing. It goes both ways. So that's why it's always better to use the proper channels and go keep everything clear cut from the beginning. So the Shaykh, he says, دواء العشق هو هذا الدعاء داء قتال وقاتل. The cure of the ishq, this is the chapter. He says this sickness of ishq, improper loving, is a killer sickness. إن يعرف أن ما ابتلى به من هذا الداء المضاد للتوحيد إنما هو من جهله وغفلة قلبه عن الله عز وجل فعليه أن يعرف التوحيد ربه وسنته أولا. So he's saying that this sickness, having this extreme form of love for something other than Allah Azza wa Jal or an improper relationship, is like a killer sickness, and it's actually the opposite, or can negate Tawheed. And it arises from the person's ignorance and his heedlessness, or his heart being heedless of Allah Azza wa Jal. And he should know, or go back to Tawheed and know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His ways first and foremost. ثم يأتي من العبادات الظاهرة والباطنة مما يشغل قلبه عن دوام الفكرة فيه. Then he should turn to the worship, the outward worship and the inward worship, that will make his heart busy and keep it occupied so it won't be remembered. So he's giving the cure to the sickness. So having improper love, he's saying the way to cure it is to get active in worship and get the apparent worship and the inward worship. So salat, dua, remembering Allah Azza wa Jal. This is a cure because it's a real danger, it's a real sickness. It can actually, he's going to talk about some of the negative effects of it, but it can, ruin a person's deen and dunya, having improper love. So the Imam is saying to cure this sickness, to turn to Allah in worship, in remembering Allah, reading the Quran, doing these types of ibadat, so you'll get your heart focused on Allah and leave that improper desire. ويكثر اللجأ والتضرع إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى في صرف ذلك عنه. And he should be humble to Allah and call Allah and turn to Allah so that he can take this sickness from his heart. وأن يراجع قلبه إليه, and he should turn his heart to Allah. وليس له داء أنفع من الإخلاص لله وهو الداء he should say ليس له دواء أنفع من الإخلاص لله وهو الدواء الذي ذكره الله في كتابه. And there's no medicine that's more beneficial to the person to get rid of this sickness than ikhlas for Allah, having your sincerity to Allah, making your heart purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. This is the best way to rid yourself of that sickness. كذلك نصرف عنه سوء والفحشاء إنه من عبادنا المخلصين. And he used the ayah of Surah Yusuf, that this is the way we turn from him, the evil and lewdness, because he was from عبادنا المخلصين. Yusuf had ikhlas for Allah. He was so close to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him from this fahsha of the Pharaoh's wife trying to call him to lewdness and to haram and to fornication. Because he was mukhlis, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him. So the Imam is saying to turn to Allah in tawheed and ikhlas, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will save you from this sickness. Some of the negative effects of having al-ishq, or the improper love, is you get الاشتغال بحب المخلوق وذكره عن حب الرب تعالى, that you get occupied with the love of the creation above the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second harm or ill effect of this is to have a punishment in the heart. So the heart becomes anxious and you have anxiety, and the person starts, that improper love, the other person becomes the focus of his thoughts and his occupation of the day. She's thinking about her, or she's thinking about him throughout the day, being neglectful of worship. Even in salat, they start thinking about the other person. And this is the way shaitan is trying to pull you away from Allah Azza wa Jal. So this is another harmful effect, that your heart won't be at peace. And he's saying that to cure this is to seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from having this sickness. Another one he's saying is that a person sometimes becomes so preoccupied with this improper love that he becomes neglectful of certain worships, and even in his dunya affairs. Like doing your work properly, thinking right in your job. A person sometimes can get to that level so badly that he even is neglectful of his own work in the dunya, let alone his ibadat in the akhirah for Allah Azza wa Jal. And he's saying that the ones that have this type of love, they are most likely to be punished with being forbidden from that thing that he desires so much. So the qaida al-fiqhiyya is من تعجل بشيء قبل أواني عوقب بحرمانه. Whoever tries to hurry something before its time will be punished by being prevented from it. Right? In fiqh, for example, if a person wants inheritance, and a'udhu billah, he kills the person to try to get that inheritance. In the fiqh al-mirath, he is forbidden from getting the inheritance. عوقب بحرمانه. He will be punished by being prevented from it. So in this situation, if a person loves something so much, right, in its improper way, that he might or she might be prevented from attaining that desire. And the Imam, he goes into like even, many more harmful ill effects of this, having the improper love. But I just wanted to touch on it to let everybody know that there's proper ways to love, and love is part of our deen, and it's a blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal. But having love of Allah is first and foremost, right? You put that first and foremost. The other things will follow. If you do things through the proper channels, Allah will bless it, and He will put love in your hearts. Like the Prophet ﷺ said that the best cure for love is marriage. So we said if you have that initial glance or that initial desire to marry somebody, it's a good person, man or woman, and to cure that, to fulfill that love, the best way is through marriage, and Allah will bless it. But if you go through the improper means and you try to have a relationship outside of marriage, it could be not blessed. So always, first and foremost, tawakkal ala Allah, put Allah first, have your love for Allah and His Messenger and the believers first and foremost, have the love for the deen, doing the proper means. You want to do something to please Allah. We want to marry to complete our deen. We want to marry to prevent ourselves from haram. We want to marry so we can have proper love with each other, right? If we have any comments or questions, inshallah, tafaddalu. Muhammad, you had a comment about marriage and love? I saw. You were making some faces back there. So, the dangers of blind following can go back also to the improper love that we have. Because somebody might develop an improper love for a person or a thing that goes beyond its bounds, and it transgresses, and that leads to blind following. So you put the person like this says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتَّخَذُوا أَحْبَارَهُمْ what is it? رَهْبَانُهُمْ وَأَرْبَابَهُمْ رَهْبَانُهُمْ. What's the ayah? The meaning of the ayah, sorry, أَرْبَابًا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, that they took their priests and rabbis as lords besides Allah, right? So they went so extreme in their blind following, their love for their priests and their rabbis, that they took them as lords besides Allah. So as Muslims, we don't have that type. Like we said, our main and most important love is to Allah Azza wa Jal first and foremost, right? So transgressing an improper love can lead to blind following, in the sense that you take a person or an individual and you put them on a pedestal, and no matter what he or she does, they're always right. Imam Malik rahimahullah, he said, "Kullu yukhti wa yusib illa sahibu hadha al-qabr." Everybody is correct and makes mistakes, except the one in this grave, pointing to the grave of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in delivering the message. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, made no mistakes. But everybody else is fallible, right? So we have to take that. We don't base our religion upon individuals. We judge the individuals by our religion, right? And that's not to say there's another extreme too, where people think that they become mujtahid, mutlaq, and they can start judging shuyukh and other scholars and du'at just because they read a couple of hadith and ayat in the Quran. That's another extreme. All extremism, subhanAllah, is like deviating from the middle path. خير الأمور الوسط والوسيط وشرها الإفراط والتفريط. The best of affairs are the middle ways, and the worst of affairs are the ones that deviate left and right. Going through extremes left and right, you'll deviate, right? But staying in that middle path, inshallah, you'll be on the right way. Hopefully that answered. Inshallah, the adhan. Subhanakallah bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.